Have you ever, been across a crowded room and your eyes just lock with someone? There's this little spark. Or maybe it's a certain scent, a laugh, the way they move. I don't know. Today on Dansplain, the science of sexual attraction.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to forget those awkward first dates and unpack this fascinating mix of biology, psychology, even culture. What draws us to each other?
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Dansplain. I'm Edward.
And I'm Lily. You, our wonderful listener, sent us so much information. It's a treasure trove, digging into the science behind sexual attraction.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah, our mission today is to unearth those key insights, those aha moments that will give you a clearer picture of what's going on beneath the surface of desire. We'll explore everything from hormones to beauty standards, even taking a look at how attraction works in the animal kingdom. So let's get down to it. Let's talk about that foundational layer, the biological underpinnings of attraction. What's happening inside us that sets the stage for that initial spark?
Well, it all starts with our internal chemistry. You know, that intricate dance of hormones and neurotransmitters. Let's take testosterone, for example. It's often thought of as a male hormone,
All right, yeah.
but it's actually crucial for libido in both men and women. So testosterone plays a key role in men in developing those physical characteristics we associate with masculinity. And in women, it helps to fuel their sexual interest.
Okay, so testosterone isn't just about building muscle and a deep voice.
Not at all. And then we have estrogen, which surges in women during ovulation. And what's really interesting here is that this hormonal peak can also lead to subtle external changes
Yeah.
that might enhance attractiveness. So we're talking things like a slight radiance in the skin or a slight shift in voice pitch.
It's almost like the body is signaling a period of peak fertility.
Precisely.
That's so interesting.
And it goes beyond just the sex hormones. Think about that initial rush of attraction. You get that almost giddy feeling.
You mean like that honeymoon phase?
Yeah. So that's largely the work of dopamine.
A pleasure chemical.
Right, often called our brain's pleasure chemical.
Yeah.
It creates this rewarding sensation that makes us want to be around that person more. Seeking out that pleasurable feeling again.
That makes a lot of sense. What about, have you ever found yourself constantly thinking about someone almost obsessively?
Yeah.
Is there a biological reason for that?
There is, and it's quite intriguing. Lower levels of serotonin have been linked to that kind of intense, almost fixated focus we experience when we're really infatuated.
Serotonin.
Yes. Another key neurotransmitter, it's a bit counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but that anxious, can't eat, can't sleep feeling
Oh, yeah.
actually has a biochemical basis.
It's interesting. I was reading something about how women's preferences, they might shift during ovulation.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. During ovulation, when a woman is most fertile, research suggests a potential tendency to find more traditionally masculine traits in men.
You mean like a deeper voice?
Yes, a deeper voice.
Like Barry White?
Exactly. Or a more defined jawline, more appealing. The evolutionary idea here is that these features might subconsciously signal good genes and overall genetic fitness,
Ah, okay.
which would have been crucial for reproductive success throughout human history.
So at our most fertile times, we might be subconsciously leaning towards partners who signal the best genetic potential.
Right.
That's really wild to think about, how these deep biological drives might still be influencing us today.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to something a bit more mysterious. Pheromones. Oh, yes.
We hear a lot about them, especially in the context of animal attraction. What's the current understanding of their role in humans?
That's a great question, Edward. And it's where the science gets a little less clear-cut. For us humans,
Yeah.
in the animal kingdom, there's no doubt about the power of pheromones. Just think about a female moth. She releases a scent that can attract males from miles away.
Wow.
It's a very direct and potent form of communication.
Long-distance flirting.
Exactly. Or the specific pheromones that trigger mating behaviors in pigs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
However, in humans, the picture is much more complex.
Yeah.
We do have something called the vomeronasal organ.
The what?
Vomeronasal organ, which in animals is responsible for detecting these chemical signals. But in humans, it's considered vestigial,
Vestigial.
a kind of evolutionary leftover. That doesn't seem to play a significant role anymore.
Yeah.
That being said, there are compounds like androstenedione.
Yeah. It's found in male sweat. And some studies suggest that it might have subtle effects on women's mood and possibly even their level of arousal.
Subtle being the key word there.
Exactly. What's really fascinating is that many scientists now believe that in humans, social and visual cues are far more important.
Like how someone looks.
Yes, how someone looks, how they behave, their social interactions, all of it. Things like that are far more important in driving attraction than these faint chemical signals.
Yeah.
We're much more reliant on our eyes
Yeah.
and our social brains.
That makes sense. We're definitely more attuned to visual and social information than a moth relying on a scent across a field.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about hormones and the maybe subtle influence of pheromones.
Yeah.
What role do our actual genes play in the long arm of evolution in shaping who we find attractive?
This is where the good genes hypothesis comes into play. And the basic idea is that we're subconsciously drawn to traits in others that signal good health and a robust immune system, qualities that would be beneficial to pass on to offspring. So think about facial symmetry, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Faces that are symmetrical are often rated as more attractive. And this symmetry can be an indicator of developmental stability and resistance to disease.
So a balanced face might subconsciously tell us something about a person's underlying genetic health.
That's the general idea. And this extends to our immune systems as well. Consider the Major Histocompatibility Complex.
MHC.
Yes, MHC. These are a set of genes that play a crucial role in our immune system's ability to recognize and fight off pathogens.
Ah, okay.
Interestingly, some theories propose that we might be attracted to individuals whose MHC genes are different from our own. The evolutionary logic here is that mating with someone genetically different in this way could lead to offspring with a more diverse and stronger immune system.
And wasn't there a study involving sweaty t-shirts?
Yes, the sweaty t-shirt study is a classic example.
It really is.
In this experiment, women were asked to sniff t-shirts that had been worn by different men and then rate how attractive they found the scent.
Wow.
And intriguingly, they often preferred the scents of men whose MHC genes were dissimilar to their own. It's a compelling hint that there might be a subconscious level of genetic compatibility influencing attraction.
Unconscious genetic matchmaking.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about physical appearance. I mean, we've touched on it a few times.
Right.
But let's delve a little deeper into those specific traits that catch our eye on a biological level. Symmetry seems to be one.
Yeah.
But what else stands out?
Beyond symmetry, there's this interesting phenomenon of averageness in faces.
Averageness.
Studies have shown that faces that are mathematically averaged together from a population are often rated as more attractive than individual, more distinctive faces.
Oh, wow.
The theory behind this is that an average face might represent a kind of genetic mean, free from extreme mutations or unusual genetic variations,
Okay.
which could be subconsciously perceived as a sign of stability.
So not too quirky, not too unique, just average.
Right. It is a bit surprising,
It is.
but it could be a subconscious cue for genetic reliability.
Ah, okay.
And then, of course, we have secondary sexual characteristics, those traits that develop during puberty, and signal reproductive potential.
Okay.
For men, this might include broader shoulders and a certain level of muscularity, while for women, a waist-to-hip ratio of around 0.7, often described as an hourglass figure, has been consistently linked to attractiveness across many different cultures.
A 0.7 waist-to-hip ratio, that's a very specific number. What makes that ratio so significant?
Well, research suggests that it's strongly correlated with optimal childbearing health and fertility in women. Interestingly, men's preference for this ratio appears to be quite consistent globally, further supporting its potential biological significance as a cue for reproductive fitness.
Okay. So biology lays the groundwork.
Yeah,
But what about what's going on in our minds?
right.
How do our thoughts and emotions factor into who we find attractive?
This is where the psychological aspects of attraction come into play. Our cognitive processes are constantly at work, when it comes to who we notice and who we're drawn to. It all starts with attention.
Okay.
We're more likely to notice potential partners based on certain salient cues.
You mean like a striking physical feature?
Yeah.
A way they carry themselves?
Exactly. Or even just being in a place where we're open to connection.
So step one is simply registering someone as a potential something.
Right.
What happens next in our minds?
Once we've noticed someone, our perceptions can be significantly influenced by something called the halo effect.
The halo effect.
Right. This is a cognitive bias. And where if we find someone attractive, we tend to automatically assume they possess other positive qualities as well, even if we have no evidence of this.
Oh,
We
wow.
might assume they're kinder, smarter, or more trustworthy simply because we find them appealing.
That's the power of a first impression.
Exactly. And then there's the mere exposure effect.
Mere exposure.
Right. It's a really interesting psychological phenomenon. It suggests that the more we are exposed to someone, even if our initial reaction is neutral, the more likely we are to develop a liking for them. And this can even extend to finding them more attractive over time. It's like how a song you weren't sure about at first
Yeah.
can become a favorite after you've heard it a few times.
So that colleague you barely noticed in the office could, through repeated interactions, become someone you find attractive.
Precisely. Intriguingly, studies have even shown that just repeatedly seeing a photograph of someone can make them seem more attractive, even if you've never actually met
Yeah.
or interacted with them in person. Familiarity, in many cases, can indeed breed attraction.
I like that. Familiarity breeds attraction.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the actual feelings involved. The emotions that accompany attraction. I mean, it's more than just noticing someone
Sure.
and thinking they look nice.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to differentiate between lust, which is primarily driven by those sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, that we discussed earlier, and love, which involves a much more complex cocktail of neurochemicals, most notably oxytocin and dopamine.
Ah.
Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone.
I've heard of that one.
Right. And it contributes to feelings of attachment and trust. While dopamine, as we know, is linked to pleasure and reward. Interestingly, brain scans of people who are deeply in romantic love show activation in the same reward centers.
Really?
Yeah, that are active in individuals with addictions.
Love as an addiction.
Right.
I mean, that explains some pretty intense relationships. What about how we form longer-term emotional bonds?
Yeah.
Does our past experience play a role in who we become attached to?
It absolutely does. Our attachment styles, which are largely shaped in early childhood through our interactions with primary caregivers, have a significant influence on how we form romantic relationships
Oh, wow.
as adults. So individuals with a secure attachment style tend to find it easier to form healthy, trusting bonds, while those with anxious or avoidant attachment styles may experience different challenges with intimacy and commitment.
So those early experiences really cast a long shadow on our romantic lives.
do.
That's powerful. Now, what about our individual personalities? Surely our own quirks and traits influence who we're drawn to.
Undeniably. Individual differences play a crucial role in partner preferences. Our own personality traits can certainly influence who we find appealing. For example, someone who is very extroverted might be drawn to a partner who is equally outgoing and enjoys social situations,
Right.
while someone who is highly creative and open to new experiences might be attracted to someone who shares those unconventional interests.
So opposites attract, or birds of a feather flock together. It seems like both can be true.
Exactly. And then, of course, we have sexual orientation, which is a fundamental aspect of who we are attracted to. It's understood to be influenced by a complex interplay of genetic, hormonal, and environmental factors. It's not a choice, but rather an inherent aspect of one's identity.
Of course. What about general trends? Are there any broad gender differences in what people tend to prioritize when it comes to attraction?
While there's a lot of overlap and significant individual variation, some studies have shown general tendencies. For instance, on average, men might place a slightly higher emphasis on physical appearance in the initial stages of attraction, while women, on average, might prioritize factors like status and resources. However, it's crucial to underscore that these are just broad statistical trends and don't apply to every single individual. There's a huge amount of diversity in what people find attractive.
Right.
We're talking about general inclinations, not hard and fast rules. I'm sure we've all encountered people who initially seem incredibly charismatic and attractive, but then over time, that spark fades.
Is there a psychological explanation for that kind of shift?
Absolutely. Individuals who exhibit narcissistic traits can often be very initially attractive. They tend to exude confidence, charm, and even excitement, which can be quite alluring in the short term. However, as their self-centeredness, lack of empathy, and need for constant admiration become more apparent, that initial attraction often diminishes or even disappears entirely.
That definitely rings true for me. Okay, so it's clear that our biology and our individual psychology are deeply involved in attraction.
Right.
But the societies and cultures we live in also exert a powerful influence on what we find attractive, right?
Absolutely. Social and cultural influences are immensely powerful in shaping our perceptions of attractiveness. Societal norms define what is considered beautiful or desirable. And the media, from advertisements to movies to social media, plays a huge role in disseminating and reinforcing these ideals. These images and messages can significantly impact our self-esteem and also shape our preferences in potential partners.
It's like we're constantly being shown an ideal and told this is what you should find attractive.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to look at how these beauty standards have shifted throughout history. For example, during the Renaissance, fuller figures in women were often seen as a sign of wealth and fertility, and therefore highly desirable.
Oh, wow.
Now, fast forward to today, and in many Western cultures, there's often a much stronger emphasis on thinness as the beauty ideal. It highlights how culturally constructed these ideas really are.
So what was once considered attractive is now not so much.
Right.
What about if we look at different cultures around the world?
Oh, yeah.
Today, are there still vast differences in what's considered attractive?
Absolutely. Cultural variations in attraction are widespread and often quite striking. Take mating practices, for instance. In many cultures around the world, arranged marriages are still a common practice, where the initial focus is often less on romantic attraction between the individuals, and more on factors like family compatibility, social standing, and economic stability. Attraction may develop over time after the marriage has been arranged.
That's a very different approach than we see in Western cultures.
Indeed. And when we look at specific beauty standards, the diversity is incredible. Think about the Kayan people in Myanmar, where women wear brass neck rings to create the appearance of elongated necks.
Elongated necks.
Okay.
A practice that is considered a mark of beauty. Or the Mersey tribe in Ethiopia, where women traditionally wear large lip plates, which are seen as a sign of status and attractiveness. These are just a couple of examples that stand in stark contrast to many Western ideals of beauty.
It makes you wonder, are any of these standards actually real? Or is it just all made up?
It's a good question.
One that really stands out is the historical practice in Mauritania, where larger body sizes in women were traditionally highly valued as a sign of wealth, status, and desirability. In some instances, girls were even force-fed from a young age to achieve these larger sizes. It's a powerful and somewhat unsettling example of how cultural values can directly shape what is considered attractive and desirable.
Wow. That's a pretty extreme example of cultural conditioning. Now, how do we even learn what's considered attractive in our own culture? Is that something that's explicitly taught, or is it more of an unconscious absorption?
It's really a combination of both. Social learning plays a significant role. Children learn about relationships and what is considered desirable through observation and imitation.
Just by watching other people.
Yeah, by watching their parents, their peers, other people in their social environment.
Okay.
They pick up on subtle cues about who is admired, who is portrayed as desirable in the media, and what characteristics seem to be valued.
So the people around us, especially during our formative years, help to shape our expectations and preferences.
Exactly. And then you have the process of socialization. Through media, including television, movies, and increasingly, social media, which often reinforce prevailing cultural norms around gender roles in dating, ideal body types, and what constitutes an attractive partner.
It's like we're constantly receiving subtle messages that shape our understanding of who we should be attracted to.
Precisely. And some research even suggests that early exposure to things like fairy tales might contribute to certain ingrained expectations and ideals about what a romantic partner should be like.
Oh, so like Prince Charming.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder how much of our so-called personal preference is actually a result of these external cultural forces. Now, this has all been so fascinating.
It is.
But what about the rest of the animal kingdom? Can we gain any insights by comparing our attractions to theirs?
Absolutely. Looking at how attraction works in the animal kingdom provides a valuable evolutionary context and can highlight some fundamental principles that may also underlie human attraction, even if they manifest in different ways. One of the first things to consider is the incredible diversity of mating systems we see in the animal world. You have monogamy, where pairs like swans and givens form lifelong bonds, often because raising offspring requires the dedicated effort of both parents.
So in some species, it's a very practical partnership driven by the needs of reproduction.
Indeed. Then you have polygamy, like in lion prides, where a dominant male typically meets with multiple females within the group. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have promiscuity. such as in bonobos, where frequent and often casual mating plays a significant role in establishing and maintaining social bonds within the community.
Wow, that's a very different dynamic than what we observe in human societies.
It is. And it serves as a reminder that our often held ideals of strict monogamy, while culturally significant in many human societies, are actually not the most common mating system across the vast majority of mammal species. In fact, only a relatively small percentage, around 3 to 5% of mammal species, are considered to be truly monogamous.
Wow, it's a really low number.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the elaborate rituals we often see in animals? You know, those complex courtship dances, like colorful displays.
Yeah.
What's the evolutionary purpose behind all that?
Those courtship behaviors are largely driven by the principle of sexual selection, which is the idea that traits that enhance an individual's chances of attracting a mate will become more prevalent in a population over generations, even if those traits aren't necessarily beneficial for survival in other ways.
Okay,
So the male peacock's extravagant and cumbersome tail,
that's a great example.
it makes him more visible to predators and requires significant energy to grow and maintain. But its allure to females outweighs these risks in terms of reproductive success.
So it's essentially a way of advertising, saying, look at me, I'm so fit
Yeah.
and have such great genes that I can afford to carry around this ridiculously impractical but attractive thing.
That's a pretty accurate summary.
I like it.
Yeah.
Think about the intricate dances performed by birds of paradise.
Oh, yeah.
These elaborate routines showcase the male's agility, coordination, overall health, signaling to potential female mates that he would be a strong and capable partner.
Exactly.
They're like feathered performers putting on a show. Are there any other particularly surprising or unique courtship rituals in the animal kingdom that you came across?
The male bowerbird is quite fascinating. He constructs these elaborate nests called bowers, often meticulously decorating them with colorful objects he finds in his environment.
Really?
Yeah, things like berries, flowers, and even shiny human-made trinkets.
Wow.
What's particularly intriguing is that the female bowerbirds seem to inspect and essentially critique these bowers, and males with the most impressive and well-decorated creations are more likely to attract a mate. It's almost like an artistic display of their fitness and resourcefulness.
So it's like nature's interior designers, trying to impress the judges.
Yes, exactly.
I like it. Now, we touched briefly on pheromones earlier in the context of humans. How do they function in the realm of animal attraction?
In the animal kingdom, pheromones and other forms of chemical signaling are absolutely crucial for driving attraction, particularly in insects and many mammals.
Okay.
These chemical cues can trigger immediate and instinctive mating responses, signal an individual's readiness to mate, indicate dominance within a social group, or even help individuals recognize relatedness.
So it's a much more direct and perhaps less emotionally complicated form of attraction.
Generally, yes. These chemical signals are often very specific and potent. For example, a female silkworm moth can release a tiny amount of a very specific pheromone that can attract male silkworm moths from distances of over a mile.
A mile away. That's incredible.
It is. That's a level of long-range chemical communication that we just don't see in humans.
Yeah, we're not quite that good. So when we compare animal attraction to our own complex human version, what are some of the key similarities and the most significant differences that stand out?
There are definitely fundamental similarities. Both humans and animals utilize physical cues.
Like appearance and scent.
Yeah, like appearance and scent. In the process of mate selection. And the underlying evolutionary drive for genetic fitness and successful reproduction is present in both. However, the differences are also quite profound. Humans rely much more heavily on cognitive factors, such as humor, intelligence, shared interests, and personality compatibility in forming attraction. Our courtship rituals are also far more extended and complex, often involving intricate social norms, communication, and cultural traditions.
So it's not just about instinct. For us, there's a whole layer of thought, emotion, and social interaction woven in.
Exactly. Unlike most animals, we can develop a strong sense of attraction to someone based on non-physical interactions alone, such as a witty exchange of emails or a stimulating intellectual conversation.
Right.
That level of cognitive and emotional connection playing a significant role in attraction seems to be largely unique to humans.
So we've journeyed through the realms of biology, psychology, society, culture,
A lot to cover.
even the animal kingdom. What are some of the core underlying principles or mechanisms that seem to tie everything together when it comes to this complex phenomenon of attraction?
When we try to synthesize all of this information, several core mechanisms emerge. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, there are some underlying universal principles that seem to have shaped our attractions over time. For example, the tendency for men to value cues associated with youth and fertility in potential partners, and for women to value cues associated with resources and protection, are thought to have evolutionary roots tied to reproductive success. However, it's crucial to remember that modern societal changes are definitely influencing and sometimes blurring these traditional patterns.
Yeah, it's not quite as straightforward as a simple biological imperative in today's complex world.
Precisely. But the cross-species significance of symmetry and indicators of overall health,
Yes.
as signs of a potentially good mate, remains a powerful underlying principle. Interestingly, as we mentioned earlier, even very young babies show a preference for symmetrical faces, suggesting a potentially innate element to this preference.
Almost like we're hardwired that way.
Right.
Okay. What about some of the key theories that attempt to explain how attraction works?
There are several influential theories in social psychology.
Okay.
Social exchange theory proposes that attraction is often based on a kind of cost-benefit analysis. We are generally drawn to people who offer us rewards, whether that's companionship, emotional support, social status, or other benefits, that we perceive to outweigh the costs involved in the relationship, such as effort, potential conflict, or emotional vulnerability.
So it's almost like an unconscious weighing of the pros and cons when we're considering a connection with someone.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Then we have attachment theory, which, as we discussed earlier, emphasizes how our early bonding experiences with caregivers shape the patterns of attraction and relationship formation that we tend to develop as adults.
Right.
And finally, the triangular theory of love, developed by psychologist Robert Sternberg, breaks down love into three key components: intimacy, passion, and commitment. In the context of initial sexual attraction, passion is the component that plays the most significant role. That intense desire and excitement we feel towards another person.
And that initial passionate feeling isn't always built to last indefinitely, is it?
You know, research suggests that the passion component of love tends to be the most volatile and often fades relatively quickly in relationships, sometimes within the first few years, as the relationship potentially transitions towards greater intimacy and commitment.
Okay. So that initial intense spark isn't always sustainable over the long haul. So when we bring it all together,
Yeah.
how do these different factors, the biological, the psychological, and the social, interact to create that complex experience we call attraction?
It's really an intricate and dynamic interplay. Biology provides the initial predispositions and fundamental drives, our hormones, our potential genetic inclinations. Psychology then filters these through our individual experiences, emotions, perceptions, and preferences. And finally, society and culture provide the broader context in which all of this operates, influencing what is deemed attractive, shaping our relationship norms, and setting the stage for how we interact and form connections.
It sounds like a constantly shifting Venn diagram with all these factors overlapping and influencing each other.
Exactly. And the rise of online dating platforms is a perfect contemporary example of this integration in action. These platforms blend biological cues through profile pictures, psychological traits highlighted in personal descriptions, and prevailing social trends in how we connect, communicate, and swipe to find potential partners.
Online dating is a great example of this in action.
It is.
Now, before we wrap things up, let's revisit a few of those particularly intriguing facts we've touched upon throughout our discussion.
Absolutely. That sweaty t-shirt study continues to be a fascinating example of the potential for a hidden genetic layer influencing our attractions on a subconscious level. And while the idea of love at first sight is a powerful romantic trope, it's likely that what we often experience as instant connection might more accurately be described as lust, masquerading as love. Although those initial intense attractions can sometimes, in fact, be predictive of long-term relationship success.
So that immediate spark isn't always just fleeting fireworks, with no real substance behind it.
Not necessarily. And consider the subtle, but potentially significant connection between scent and symmetry. Studies have indicated that women tend to rate the natural body odor of more symmetrical men as being more pleasant, subtly linking those biological indicators of good genes to our sense of olfactory allure.
So it all seems to keep circling back to these underlying biological cues, even in our complex human interactions.
It often does. And when we look at some of the more extreme cultural practices around beauty and attractiveness, like neck elongation or foot binding, They serve as powerful, if sometimes unsettling, reminders of the lengths that humans will go to in pursuit of what is perceived as desirable within their specific cultural context, no matter how arbitrary those standards might seem from an outside perspective.
It really highlights the immense power of cultural conditioning in shaping our perceptions.
Indeed. And finally, the evolutionary quirk of the peacock's magnificent but impractical tail is a wonderful illustration of runaway selection,
Yes.
where the sheer appeal of a trait to potential mates drives its exaggeration far beyond what is necessary for basic survival. Sometimes, at least in the realm of reproduction, looking good seems to be all that matters.
So, as we've explored today, attraction isn't just some mysterious magical spark that happens out of the blue. It's a deeply intricate interplay of our fundamental biology, our individual psychology, and the complex societies and cultures we inhabit. From the subtle dance of hormones and pheromones
Right.
to the learned ideals of beauty and the universal drive for reproductive success, there's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface than initially meets the eye.
It makes you think, in our increasingly digital world where so many of our initial connections are formed through screens and curated online profiles, are we perhaps losing touch with some of these more primal, perhaps even unconscious, cues of attraction that have shaped us for millennia? And if so, how might that be subtly reshaping our relationships and our understanding of connection?
That is a fascinating thought. We hope this deep dive into the science of sexual attraction
Lots to think about.
has given you some truly intriguing insights into this fundamental aspect of the human experience.
If you enjoyed unpacking this complex topic with us today, make sure to subscribe to Dansplain so you don't miss any of our future explorations into the fascinating world around us.
And for even more in-depth articles, behind-the-scenes content, and links to some of the resources we mentioned today, be sure to visit us at www.Dansplain.xyz. Thanks for diving deep with us.